Good morning, and thank you for joining us for another edition of Coffee with Tom and Joanne. I'm Joanne Taranto.
And I'm Tom Matthews. And today, Joanne and I are starting a series called Why Work with a Realtor? It's a great question. We get it all the time by both buyers and sellers. And so we're going to break up into little segments, 10-minute, which is how long these videos are, of different components of why you might want to work with a realtor. And so, Joanne, what is the first thing that's important to you and I?
So, the most important reason to work with a realtor is relationships,
Yeah.
and relationships matter.
Yes, they
We have
do.
spent 18 plus years building relationships with other agents in the market, with service providers in the market, and anything you could need, soup to nut, from start to finish of owning a home.
Yeah.
And the reason that we do this is because we provide a service.
Yes.
And when we are engaging with clients, we look at ourselves as the quarterback of the football team, right? So we're the quarterback, we're throwing the passes, and we are determining the plays that make sense moving forward. So when you are engaging in a real estate transaction, there are certain professionals that you need besides having a great real estate agent. So Tom, why don't you talk about how we have met some of these people and who are they?
Yeah. I mean, so the important people are your mortgage broker,
Yep.
your lawyer,
Yep.
your home inspector. And what a lot of people don't realize is most people think that we spend all of our time showing homes and writing offers or preparing marketing materials for selling homes. And yes, we do spend a lion's share of that time, but we do spend a lot of time with professionals. So what we do is we will oftentimes meet professionals through transactions. But Joanne and I believe in doing business with people you know, you like, and you trust. So we might meet a professional in a transaction, so we get to know them and we like them, but we haven't built that bond of trust. So what we oftentimes do is say, hey, we had a great time working with you on this transaction. Can we follow up with a cup of coffee or a lunch? You
Mhm.
can learn a lot about a person when you're doing that because if they say yes, it means they're open to new relationships.
Right.
And then when you go to have the lunch, Joanne and I believe that if you're early for a meeting, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. And if you're late, you're fired. And so, if you have a lunch with somebody and you say you're going to meet them at noontime and you're there at 11:50 and they show up at 12:10, that starts to give you some ideas. It's like, I could represent referring them 20 clients. And if they're going to do that to their best client, what are they going to do to my referral? So Joanne and I are kind of through our techniques that we've learned in networking are making sure that we're taking the time to qualify people. Because when we make a referral, there are two reputations on the line. Ours, who are the ones making the referral, and then the person we're referring to. So those relationships we have learned how to curate them to ensure that our clients are getting the best experience possible buying a home. But Joanne, there's also, I think what's overlooked in a real estate transaction is the importance of having a co-broke. So a broker on the other side of the transaction that you know. Can you tell the audience why is that so important?
Oh my gosh. Knowing the agents in the market is such an important part to our business, and understanding something about, their business is even better.
Hmm.
But the idea is that when you bring an offer, let's say you're operating as a buyer's agent. When I bring an offer to the table, I want the other agent on the other side of the transaction to say, "Ah, Joanne from Tom and Joanne. I know them. They close deals."
Right.
That's a very, very important thing. And you want to have the reputation for closing deals. And so it's really, really important that when you're working in that transaction, that you're working collaboratively with the other agent, and that you are anticipating things that are upcoming in the transaction so that you can smooth them over without anybody asking any questions or creating any hiccups. And by working collaboratively with the other agent, it means sometimes you just call them to check in and ask them a question. But a lot of the time, people hide behind technology. They will send text messages and emails. And we really feel that picking up the phone is a very important part to our business. So, conversely, when we're working as a listing agent, And specifically, if you're in a situation where you have more than one offer on the table, we operate under the guise of utter transparency,
Yes.
and we want to be as approachable as possible.
And
Because
oh, go ahead. Oh, I was just going to add, one thing I wanted to add about this topic about knowing your co-broke, because this came up a lot the last couple of days teaching, is that we are coming out of a market that was, I would almost say, an anomaly market of the time we've been selling, where it was so hot that you were seeing multiple bids with cash offers, no contingencies. And we were in an environment where literally it could be, we will just pick the best offer because it really stood out. But if the market continues to normalize and go into a more normal rhythm, you could have 3 offers on the table. They all have home inspections. They all have financing contingencies, and they're all at the same price.
Mhm.
Then the question becomes, how do I decide the winning bid? And this is where relationships will start to matter again. Because
Yeah.
if all the offers have the same down payment, same offer price, same terms,
Mhm.
how will a seller select an offer? And if
Right.
you have an agent, we're the listing agent, we look up these 3 agents, we look up their MLS numbers. We have one agent who closed 200 homes, one that's closed 100 homes, and one that's closed 2 homes. There's a lot of compelling reasons to pick the person who's closed 100 homes if you know, like, and trust them, because they have the experience that if you run into an issue, and let's face it, folks, this is real estate. We
Yeah.
run into issues almost every day.
Yeah.
Can you navigate the waters? And B, if you have experience, like if Joanne or I say to a client, listen, you're buying a house that has a new roof, but there's still an open permit on the roof. It hasn't been closed yet. We can say fairly confidently that that's an issue that can be resolved quite easily, and you should have confidence moving forward. But if you've only sold one house, the buyer may not have that confidence.
And you can't instill that confidence in your client if you don't have it yourself.
Correct. Right. And so, that's a really important piece of this transaction because, you know, probably one of the hardest things about real estate that we see, particularly from our corporate clients, is that there's so much gray area.
Mhm.
So many people operate in environments where it's black and white. In real estate, there's so many nuances that come up,
Right.
and getting to a closing table can be challenging. And that's where like relationships matter, and people just overlook that, and that's something that we really want to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, and even having relationships with other agents, if for example, come across a problem that you haven't seen before,
Right.
right? So if something comes up that you haven't seen before, you want to be able to pick up the phone and call somebody who also has a lot of experience and say, "Hey, have you ever seen this? And if so, how did you resolve it?"
Right. Yeah.
Or do you have the contact that I would need to be able to resolve this? And I'll give you an example. We once
Yeah.
had a seller who paid off and closed their home equity line between purchase and sale and closing, but the banks don't process the payoffs that quickly, and it created a problem for us getting to a closing because we needed the discharge statement for the home equity line. Typically, you would close the home equity line at the same time as selling the property and transferring the deed. But this seller didn't know, went ahead and closed the home equity line of credit, but then we couldn't get the home equity line discharged prior to closing, which then translated into a title issue.
Mm-hmm.
So I had never come across this before, and I called up a colleague of mine and said, what would you do in this scenario? And they said I would go as high up the chain as you can at the bank. And so then I leveraged all the relationships that I had to get the president of the bank on the phone to get us a discharge that day. And that's an extreme scenario, and I
Yeah.
hope I never run into that again. But having the confidence to reach out to colleagues and the foresight to know that of who you need to get in touch with to make it happen is, part of building relationships.
Yeah.
And so after that happened, you send a thank you note out to everybody who's involved and make sure that they know that they're appreciated for their impact on your transaction.
No, I think that's awesome. I think this is a great example of why people should hire a realtor, and just the first, part of our series, which is relationships. So
Relationships matter.
yes, they do. So I want to thank everyone for coming today and watching Coffee with Tom and Joanne. I'm Tom Matthews.
And I'm Joanne Taranto. Cheers.